education, the best expertise that is available, the best experience that is available. So we want to use these people as sounding boards. We want to use them as a mechanism so that in case there are particular research and development needs, they can also participate. Sure. You're doing the angle.
Yes, sir. I'll just invite.
I'm trying to do the engagement. This morning I took the French route, so Paris was quite long. Tonight I'm taking the German route via Cologne. The German train is already going crazy. There's lots of warning.
That's true.
I think the French train should just go there. The German same as they are too sensitive. It's not that bad.
Yeah. Sometimes, I don't know, once happened to me.
Dr. Maria, we are almost ready. So,
Summary and closing remarks. जी सर तो थॉमस को ला देगा ना हाँ थॉमस हैंड ओवर करेंगे थॉमस को बोल दीजिए हाँ थॉमस को बोल चुका हूँ थॉमस गैराबेटियन थॉमस बोल रहा थॉमस फ्रॉम सोरापा यूरोप थॉमस फ्रॉम सोरापा
you make a two-slide presentation after Maria speaks.
No.
Yeah, after my experience. So first, you will make Maria, then make a presentation, then hand over to the moderator.
Then I don't know you. I don't know you. Yeah. So this
That's very convenient.
yeah, because if you don't have a card,
One for colleagues, actually. You're anonymous.
well, yes. Though
You
except
can
in
say
the
whatever
game.
you want.
Yes, you can say whoever you are.
However,
However, with phones, it's becoming a difficult. So what
first thing and second, the names are written. So,
which is the QR code. So you just do a picture of the QR code and then they just
yes. However, reliance so much on IT.
when this disappears.
Yes, when this disappears is another issue. Once I've lost my
Oh,
टाइम हो गया क्या क्या टाइम हो
fell
रहा है
found after an hour. I was traveling to Greece, and then it was the time that we had the COVID passport, that we are vaccinated. I had my ticket, everything was here. So if I did not have found, if I did not find my phone,
you didn't exist.
I would have to not even, go back to my home. I mean, so
You are absolutely right.
there are things which are
My wife always insists on keeping a card on
some
paper.
yeah, she's right. My husband does the same. And except, I'm not on the time.
Yeah, I also keep everything on this side.
But he does write sometimes.
Okay.
So you will be in touch with my colleagues.
Shall we?
Yeah. I think Sabha is just come.
Sabha, ready?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the post-lunch session. We will try and not be a panacea to your insomnia. A brief agenda of the meeting. We have 2 special remarks. Then we have a presentation by Sabha on the Star C. And after that, we will have a moderated discussion.
Recording in progress.
After that, we will have a roundtable discussion, which will be moderated by Thomas Garabitian from Solar Power Europe. So I now request Director General Dr. Mathur to open the session.
Thank you very much, Nikhil. You've heard about the Star C program. Nevertheless, this is very much a program which is still developing, which is still working. One of the challenges that we face is that every country is different. And because every country is different, the kinds of needs that they have also are different. Which means that we constantly need to reimagine, reconfigure what we do, the products, the approaches, and so on. And in doing so, we want to be able to link to the global R&D system, and I'm delighted, Maria, that you are here with us. Maria is with DG Research here in the European Union. And therefore, try to create a network of organizations who we can use as a sounding board for the kinds of issues. And hopefully, as we move ahead, some of these will get converted from sounding boards also to active partners. In doing so, there is a huge amount of challenges that we see. We see challenges in terms of identifying the kinds of needs that are there, which could be met by solar energy. There are issues relating to the approaches. You may have the fanciest widget in the world, but what if it's not used? We're also looking at challenges related to this is a new product. Why on earth should I finance it? Do they need to find new supply chains? But at the heart of it, the problem remains how do I bring in the R&D system into helping the star centers as they evolve. They should have the comfort that I have a global R&D network behind me. With this in mind, we would very much like the colleagues here to focus on how that would happen. We have people here. I mean, obviously, Maria, who is here with me, is with DG Research in the European Union. We also have Hervé, where's Hervé? From INES. We have Simon, there you are. Simon from Fraunhofer, Simon Phillips from Fraunhofer. We have Aygun, where is Aygun? From Azerbaijan? Oh, she left, okay. Moses, of course, we all know. Michael is here as well? No. Asser is very much here. We have also Jonas? Okay. Julia? There you are. So we have a large number of people with different kinds of backgrounds who are around this table. I would like them all to focus on how we can make the Star C system. We're delegating it to countries, but we also want to make sure that these countries are able to provide their best. And therefore, how do we connect with the R&D system? It is with this background that we are all here together, and I look forward to ensuring that we are able to, over a period of time, devise a mechanism through which this could work. So without further ado, Maria, it's all yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to participate in this meeting, in the meeting of your alliance. Research and innovation, yes, indeed, is very important. It is very important for achieving our decarbonization objectives and for achieving, of course, a transition to a net zero carbon energy system, in which photovoltaics has a major role to play. Since 2015, since the Paris Agreement, efforts from many countries are focused on decarbonization and on transition in a system where emissions from the energy system for the production and use will be zero by 2050, by 2060, depending on the country. I mean, the time frame perhaps differs, but the objective is the same. Now, photovoltaics, as I said before, it has a major role to play, and especially for countries that have not established incumbent systems, energy systems, the transition to photovoltaics is easier. Easier by the fact that they have an advantage. PV has an advantage. It is small and modular, and it does not require huge infrastructure. It can be applied in a small rooftop installation, or it can be used in large energy systems. And therefore, the transition to that kind of system, which includes a major part of photovoltaics, is easier. It would be like the mobile phone. In certain countries, we transitioned immediately to the use of this without using the classical phones and the classical systems. So, research and innovation, as everybody works, everybody around the world is working on photovoltaics, on how to increase the deployment of photovoltaics, how to increase recently the manufacturing capacity of photovoltaics so that the energy system in every single country is secure technologically, in the sense that we have what we need to install. Research and innovation takes a major and important role, because there is not a course, not a competition on who's going to do first, but there are still challenges that need to be overcome. And these challenges are technical, for example, the efficiency, the ways that PV can be used, but at the same time, they are challenges which relate to the value chain and to sourcing of materials, to sustainability. And that kind of challenges can be better tackled in an international level and through international cooperation. For example, the value chain challenges, or the sustainability issues, or recyclability or recycling of used PV, the huge volume of PV that will be used in the future, is a major issue that can be better tackled if there is, of course, international cooperation and exchange of knowledge, same standards, same regulations, for example. There are many things that can be better tackled when there is collaboration and exchange of knowledge and information among international participants. So I want to cut short now. We will have a fruitful discussion, I guess, and I hope. For the moment, I can't say more, but I hope that at the end we will be able to conclude with more concrete things.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think your point about doing this in a globally collaborative manner makes great sense. And obviously you speak both from experience as well as from an understanding of how we will go ahead. And like you, I hope that we have a fruitful discussion. Now, when I was introducing our speakers, I forgot to mention Monolita Vale from RINAC. She wasn't here earlier, so you did not hear my spiel of how proud we are to associate with RINAC, but delighted that you are here. Nikhil, we now move to a two-slide presentation by my colleague Saba on the need for the network, and I hope that we would be able to have some concrete results on how we create kind of a sounding board for R&D associated with the star centers.
Thank you, sir. Earlier, I wanted to have a long presentation, but realizing the fact that you just had a good lunch, I can't really dare to have a long presentation. So I'll just be very quick. Yeah, just to set the context of why we are doing this particular event and what we want out of this event. So as you know, I mean, as I say, we are working with number of SIDS and LDCs. These are countries at different levels of solar deployment. And in past several years, we have realized that there is a huge disparity between the research and innovation resources that they have and what the developed world already has, I mean, what they have achieved so far. These are mainly in terms of the infrastructure, inadequate infrastructure, technical capacities to do short-term or long-term research or research projects. They really lack data and standards and guidelines as well to conduct research, innovation. They don't have really high-tech standardized labs to undergo long-term research. And of course, overall lack of supportive ecosystem as well in terms of promoting innovation by the government or in general public at large as well. Of course, the developed countries have expertise and knowledge. They have dedicated experts specialized with specialized skills, standardized products and services, and they collaborate between each other. I mean, within Europe and within the developed world, you can see a lot of collaboration happens either through standalone projects or initiatives as well. We see a lot of quality assurance through quality metrics, which the countries have developed. I mean, you all have developed. That has helped to optimize the cost as well in solar energy through automation, through streamlining workflows, all of that. And of course, overall developing an orientation for a changed ecosystem where government, public, private sector, businesses, all of them can work together on research and innovation. And this, what we want to also deploy in the SIDS and the LDCs through your help. And that's why we want this session to have a detailed discussion as a sounding board, as DG sir said in the beginning. That's going to help us to take forward the agenda of not only accelerated deployment of solar energy, but also advancing research and innovation in ISA member countries. Of course, technology is important. We are looking at technological research and technological innovation as well. But we also want to learn from you the policy and regulations that you have developed on solar energy so far, and that has helped to take forward not only deployment, but also incentivizing solar, incentivizing research and innovation within the solar domain. We want to learn from you the information and the standards that you have developed. You have developed number of best practices. You have technology benchmarks. So SIDS and LDCs would love to know from you in terms of research and innovation as well. And capacity building. So STAR Center's primary focus is to build capacity through training programs that we have. And last but not the least, technological innovation, which is of course one of the prime focus for the STAR Center as well. So with these two slides, I just wanted to set the context of this discussion, what exactly we are expecting out of this session, which will be taken forward to the LDCs and SIDS for future collaborations, for future partnerships. Thank you.
So that provides a background. Thomas, now it's all yours.
Well,
I can afford to go to sleep now.
I don't know. It would be maybe good if you were very attentive, and you could even participate if you wanted to. So thank you for inviting me to do the moderation of this discussion. I'm hoping I don't have too much work to do actually, and you just have a very productive discussion. But I have the privilege to provide you with some questions and topics. So thank you to the three very good presentations that introduced this discussion. And now to start with something of a general question, I would like to ask a bit what role do you see for international cooperation on research innovation for photovoltaics, and especially coming a bit to something that were mentioned already, what are the main topics that would be particularly crucial to advance via international cooperation to really advance the PV sector? And do feel free to raise your hand or just take the floor. Yes.
Okay, I'll try the microphone. I also thank you very much for inviting me to this committee, to this regional committee. I'm Hervé Druon from INES, French National Institute for Solar Energy. I'm in charge of the capacity building transfer in INES. I'm not a researcher, but INES today is an energy transition institute. The French government have promoted the creation of this kind of institute, and they want to promote the research about energy, and to cooperate. The National Research Agency is willing to increase the international cooperation with other programs, European programs, international programs. So to me, ISA cooperation could be a good answer, one of the good answers to this willing of our government. I think that we have seen that with the ESIA, the European Alliance for Solar Energy initiative, that cooperation is crucial for us. So we are looking for cooperation throughout Europe, but we have strong links with Africa, North Africa, South Equatorial Africa, under Sub-Saharan Africa. So we have a lot of participation together, and I think that one opportunity why European research and innovation laboratories should participate with developing countries is that generally in developing countries you have some conditions you don't find throughout developed countries. So you don't have electric grid everywhere. You have to mix electric grid power grid with microgrids. So you have not the same items everywhere. You have meteorological conditions, extreme meteo conditions, typhoons. In the heat, for example, INES is working in Atacama Desert in South America. It's the best and the worst place for PV solar, because the best because you have a high intensity of sun, but you have very low temperatures, very high temperatures, salted air. So to me, developing countries are an opportunity to push further our research, our developed research, and also about the critical level of renewables in energetic mix in Europe. We have a European grid, so we have not today this difficulty of integration of renewables. So variable renewables in the power production. And for example, Niger, if you put a PV plant, a big PV plant, a ground plant in Niger, maybe the capacity of this plant would represent 30–40% of the total capacity of power production, and that puts some new difficulties developing countries hasn't faced today, but are working about. But we don't know that, and we could help these countries to face these difficulties, and it would help our countries to treat it when we, I hope, will have more than half PV power installed in Europe, or new renewables installed in Europe.
Thank you. Any reactions already, or follow-up? Because, I mean, I felt you already mentioned some very important points. Maybe one that is also quite important, and we also discussed it a bit before coming in, is the question of the availability of people to deploy the PV also locally. And there's maybe also a lot that can be exchanged globally. I don't know if someone wants to build a bit on this topic.
Hi, sorry. I'm Julia von Franz, Policy and Advocacy Officer at the Alliance for Rural Electrification. So yes, our main focus is on Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and mainly rural areas. So it's rural renewable energy solutions. So thank you very much for those introductions first and those comments. Actually jumping right on the topic that you addressed. Indeed, I mean, it was actually all touched on, all the important bits that would need to be considered, obviously. And then in terms of the cooperation also, I was thinking common standards, obviously. I mean, it's something that's being worked on, etc., but that could obviously still be scaled and elaborated on and further worked on. And also accreditation, seen that, or cross-border accreditation. I mean, within Europe, there's been lots of legislation on that in a more larger context as well. But also in terms of, and I know the Star C is also looking into harmonizing and training. But what about accrediting researchers and the studies they've done? Because from experience, anyways, in a variety of fields, not just in PV or solar, that is a huge stumbling block so far for a lot of people. And so, yeah, that was another thing that I just wanted to put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Hello, Manolita Wheel here from RENAC, Renewables Academy. I know some of you in the group. Really nice to be here. I guess I want to follow up with both of your comments, and one of the areas where I think, it's just a specific word, applied research. I think, that's an area where that exchange would work really well. And there's probably a lot of room still left in that area to be explored. And I was actually looking at the talking points that we're potentially going through today, and I made a correlation at least between question 1 and question 6, which I'm sure you'll get to at later point. But I noted here a few points that I think, and you mentioned one of them here, the international standards, then testing and quality assurance. These are all areas where there is, huge potential, and not just on the R&I level, but I've noted here because I come from, I work for RENAC and Renewables Academy, and we're focused not so much on research and innovation itself, but more on training and capacity building in itself. And we work as a facilitator often between research institutes, perhaps in the private sector. That's one of the things we do. And so looking at it from our perspective, it goes beyond just research and innovation, but also I've noted things like, definition of just the jobs and the roles. That can be a lot more unification, and that would, in the long term, make it much more easier. And that's something that my colleague just touched on. The porosity of borders will increase over time, and it's something that we have to, I think, across all of the countries in the world, be prepared for. And this is one area where you have to start preparing for it already. So make sure that people trained in one country are able to go and work in another country. And that's an ideal, and I think we have to work towards it. And I guess the other, that ties into my last point, this facilitating exchange of professionals, be it in R&I or be it in actually learning how to install a system. That has to be something that gets worked on. And I think this forum would be a place where one can already start to establish these standards, and that was my input.
So can I jump in? So Monolita and one of the things that I wanted to focus on was, do we need, first of all, I completely agree with your point that we need training and certification to be valid across countries. But right now we have at least 3 different standards across the world, maybe many more. It depends on how you cut the cake. Is there a need to have a standard for training, a global standard?
Anybody else want to? Please.
I don't think we need the international standard for the whole world, but common standards for example, wide regions, sub-Saharan Africa, or it depends on the latitude, because you have same conditions, same kind of environment. So technological bricks are always the same, but it's the way you build them together that may be different due to different conditions, different rules, government rules, or different geographical position, so or economics. I think it would facilitate to have basic breaks of training, and that can be put together. As I said at my first declaration, you have to me 2 kinds of trainees: the big companies and grid operators that are engineers, universities, and so on can train them. But if you have a small village in the jungle, or near the jungle, we know that in Senegal, because in Senegal, in Dakar, you have the capacity of trained people. But if you go to the east of Senegal, on the map of Africa, it seems a small country. But when you have to go to east of Senegal, it's more difficult. So you have to train different people without logistics, without diploma, and so on. So you have to make a break for poor people, and to make a break for government official companies, and companies that run the power grids. So to me, you have different trainings to give if you are in Europe, for example, or if you are in Niger. It's quite the same, but you have to adapt it to the local conditions. So you can build the basic bricks and then customize the programs in every country. And it would be cheaper.
I'm sorry to come back in just half a minute. One, I completely agree with you, Irvin, that yes, you need at least 2 levels, if not more, of training. But I was looking at a slightly different view. And this goes back to the point that about 20 years ago, when we were installing wind machines in India, the wind machines were coming from Denmark. And they were essentially designed for the North Sea. They were designed for 2 inches of ice. They were designed for particular high wind speeds. When you applied them in the tropics in India, it was a much more warm environment. It was also, because it was by the seaside, it was also a lot more corrosive. And consequently, there was a certain amount of re-engineering that occurred. I was completely surprised when the same thing happened with solar. I thought that we had learned our lesson, but then I realized that the people were very different. And I'm actually wondering whether that kind of reconfiguration of designs may also be needed in addition to what you said.
Moises Behar from the U.S. Department of State. Just a quick comment. I believe that certification is important across the value chain all the way to academic research, particularly in developing countries. And why certification is important? Because with it comes trust. And trust is needed when you are introducing what will be in many parts of the world new technology like solar. Even in the U.S., there needs to be more of a consumer awareness about solar, the benefits of it. But I also would like to add that this certification and standards, they need to be adapted, obviously, to the local context. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone to come back on the point of the difference of engineering needs, maybe, between technologies north-south? Or we just assume that... sorry. Oh, agency, my bad.
Yeah, hello, Sascha Thielmann from GIZ. Maybe more on the skill side and the training. I think you don't really... You always have to consider that on the one hand, yes, you need some basic skills that everyone has to have, and this is sort of something like that can be standardized. But the real challenge is that you have very different starting points in the countries with different qualifications, different anchor points where you would anchor the qualifications that you offer to. So this is really the trade-off. I think it's really worthwhile to move towards more standardized approaches, and that's also something I think that for ISA will be very important, because this can be your field of action to work towards more standardized approaches across countries. But then you always have to consider the local adjustment to these, depending on the local circumstances and starting points. That's sort of one point I wanted to raise. The other one is really the importance of your local partners. And this has to do with the localization of the training. You really need to have credible partners that have a good reputation and that will then also be accepted by the local markets, so to say, and that they will also see the demand for their training. And if you link it to not so suitable partners, this can be difficult. And what we have seen in some of our partner countries is that there's always a bit of a trade-off between sort of the official governmental way, which can sometimes be more academic training institutions because it's linked to the more formal training structures in a country that may not be as dynamic as you would like to see it. And then the demand may not be there from the private sector. But on the other hand, you have sort of more hands-on training institutions, which might not always be those that are proposed by the departments of energy that are your political partners in the country. So this is, I think, also something that needs to be considered.
Great. So, Thomas, one of the things that we immediately learn is that there needs to be some amount of discussion on how we choose partners.
Yes.
So this is very interesting, and this actually is giving me an answer for the question which was coming to my mind from past several months for the project that we are doing with support of Government of France. So we are doing this project in 3 countries: Senegal, Bhutan, and PNG, Papua New Guinea, and we are developing qualification and certification framework for the services, for the solar services, including skilling as well. So the idea is that we work with UNIDO, and UNIDO has their regional centers in all the regions: East Africa, West Africa, Pacific. So we are working with PICRI, ICRI, and IACRI, and they are developing sort of a framework at the regional level so that it encourages, of course, the cross-border job opportunities, as Manolita was talking about. So you have a standardized format of how you qualify people to have certain kind of a training, and then how you also certify them and say that, yeah, I mean, this person has gone through a particular set of training, that's why he's or she is a rooftop technician. Then we will take it to the country level. Now the problem is that right now we are planning to embed it within the government institutions, which actually certifies, where certification is more credible from their side. But when you come to the partner organization, when you come to smaller organization, the certification doesn't carry that level of credibility. Yeah. So we are still struggling to decide, I mean, whether we should partner with the government or whether we should partner with really good technical institutes there, because the government will go, as you said, the government has a very academic approach. Yeah. Whereas the technical centers, technical institutes will have a very technical kind of a approach. So the struggle for us is whether we should go with the government or we should go with the technical center. But yeah, I mean, this discussion also is giving me an opportunity to have another round of sort of a small audience discussion on how we should go about this.
Thank you. Maybe one additional thought on this. You could also turn it around and not actually look at the training institutions as such, but as those who would eventually certify the trained people. And that's a sort of an approach that we have taken in some countries, where we are leaving the actual training up to the market and private training institutions provide it. But there is a certification process for those who are trained. And this is then coordinated, could be by a governmental institution, could be by a solar association. And this is then sort of another approach where you leave the actual training to the market and maybe have some incentives for different providers to prove themselves. It's probably an approach in bigger markets, bigger countries, where you have a lot of demand. For smaller countries, it might be a different story, but maybe just as an idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we can take note that training skills and ensuring also the quality of this training is a very important topic. I don't know if there's another one that is becoming very prominent as well, or whether we should maybe move towards following topics, because we have a very long discussion. So if there's no urgent comments, we can move forward. Yeah, so maybe a bit the second topic we wanted to discuss is a bit the opportunities that you would be seeing for underdeveloped and developing countries to access the centers of excellence on solar or overall on renewable energy in the EU, and also what role governments can play in European countries to facilitate a bit the access of either organizations or directly increase international cooperation bilaterally. Yes?
I'm Simon Phillips from the Fraunhofer Institute for Solar Energy Systems in Freiburg. We are one of Europe's largest research institute on solar energy. And I mean, speaking of opportunities, I want to raise the, go to a higher level, so to say. I just had a talk where I put together scenarios where PV will be in 2050. There are different scenarios. And the reasonable scenarios end up with an installation of something like 40 to 80 terawatts. We are now at 1 terawatt. And this 1 terawatt is installed in, let's say, 10 to 15 countries, mostly on a gigawatt scale. So we have 150 or more countries that don't have any or only low amount of PV. So we need to, I like this comment of we need to be prepared. We really need to be prepared in all dimensions for this wave of PV that is coming and that's unstoppable because all countries will start somehow. And I think now it's a big chance if we organize an exchange well, that the countries that have experience and also the research institutes or others who have experience in PV and capacity building and so on from developing countries, or there are also some countries that might not count to the developed countries who have already experience in PV, but that we bring this experience together to help the countries that are now starting with PV to accelerate, avoid mistakes, and so on. And that goes on all dimensions. As we said, capacity building is quite important. We don't have, I would say, we don't have an agency currently that can provide capacity building in the scales that we need. We don't have information standardization at that level. We don't have, I mean, from the technological side, I think we have experience in many countries, but not in all countries. And as Maria said before, the benefit of PV is that it's modular, so you can have it small or you can even have big power plants. And what you need depends on the individual countries. And there we also have to learn and prepare and help countries that are just starting to do it as quick as we need, because 2050 is not too far. Modules that are installed now will mostly be around in 2050 already, so we really need to accelerate, and that goes with sustainability, capacity building, manufacturing. Everything has to scale up, and I think many people have not really realized yet, even in the PV community, what kind of upscaling we will need in the next 10 years. So I really like this idea of having an exchange or some kind of platform from, I would not call it developed countries to others, but from countries who have experiences with PV or with large shares of PV to countries who don't have as much experience. So it's not something where you say the developed countries train the others, but we need a community of countries who have experience on different scales to countries who don't have as much PV currently, and there organize an exchange.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, everybody. Asser Berling from the Danish Ministry of Climate, Energy and Utilities, and I mean, from the Danish side, we're not a world leader on PV technology, even though we do have around 3 gigawatt of installed solar supply in our system, which for a small country is quite an amount. But you mentioned so how can we learn from each other and how can we develop together the best way, and maybe if you allow me to maybe delve into some of the bilateral government-to-government cooperation that we have in an energy sector. It is not directly solar, but just to give you an example of how cooperation can be in the sector. We have at the Danish Energy Agency bilateral cooperation with around 24 countries on some of the issues where we are maybe some of those with quite a heavy experience. Wind, as mentioned by the Honourable DG, district heating and other issues. So in these cooperation schemes, we have actually long-term advisors sitting within sometimes line ministries in the countries that we cooperate with. And just to follow up on the fact that no, this is not only sort of a developed versus developing country. We also have bilateral cooperation with countries such as France or the Netherlands and so on some of these issues. And as one experience from our side is that de-risking is very important. There's a financial aspect to de-risking, but it's also about, in our experience, it has been also about centralization and planning and permitting procedures. So we have developed what we call one-stop shop, where it becomes easier for developers to navigate the system. So it's essentially to ensure successful and affordable clean energy transitions, and to mobilize climate finance in the end. So, and for instance, we have an offshore center of excellence with India, where we can benefit from our different points of expertise. Maybe just one more point on the private sector and research and innovation. In Denmark, we around 3 years ago had made the goal of being 70% reductions in 2030. We didn't know how to get there. Now we do. We're on track, but the government made the decision to ask the private sector, what do you need from us? Because we don't know it all as government. So we established the 14 climate partnerships, everything from the agricultural sector, transport, and also energy. And each sector came up with a series of recommendations, some of which are touching upon removing barriers and supporting research and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reaction to that? Yes, Edwin? Sorry.
Yes. I pressed almost all buttons. Yes, so thank you very much for having this discussion. I thought this would be a good moment to also explain a little bit our role as EU, and also the project that we are financing, the EU ISA cooperation project, which aims at connecting better, although you are already very well connected, the International Solar Alliance with the that's my Siri, with the global research and innovation community, the financial community, and the business community, including the European community. And we should realize that here it's not only European countries, but there's also, for example, the United States. But the idea is to connect better, and we have also contributed to an earlier discussion that took place on a kind of sounding board in which we discussed, for the first time brainstormed about how to create a kind of structure through which ISA can easily get together the most relevant experts in the research and innovation area to discuss focused areas, to have really concrete discussions, for example, on extreme weather conditions, or on the newest forms of floating solar, or on waste and recycling and critical materials. So there are all kinds of areas, and such a sounding board would enable the International Solar Alliance to have the right people at the table and to really discuss the newest technology. So that's something, and I think we will get back to that, but I just want to explain why we are so interested in having this meeting, and I'm very grateful that also DG RTD is here. So one of our aims is also to not only connect to all the actors in the field, but also to better connect to ourselves, to the European Commission. The second thing I wanted to mention is the connection with European universities, and perhaps it's good to also explore, and it was mentioned this morning in the regional committee meeting, a possible link with Erasmus+, So to see whether students from all over the world can study in Europe, in particular in this area, I think that's also something to explore further. Thank you. Once again, many thanks for having this meeting.
Thank you. Any other reaction on the topic? Yes, Maria?
Yes. I would just want to follow up. Actually, the European Commission is financing something similar with many countries perhaps which are members also of the International Solar Alliance, but it is in the broader sense of renewable energy, not only solar. And we are financing mainly an initiative from the European Union and the African Union. So it involves African countries and member states of the European Union, which have exactly what you are proposing. Actually, there is a partnership, and this partnership has developed an agenda, which are the primary objectives in order to promote renewable energy in Africa, in countries of Africa, to promote also knowledge transfer or knowledge exchange between the European Union or members, European Union members that participate in this partnership and countries from Africa. And actually there are 3 levels of cooperation and 3 subjects of cooperation. It involves climate change, then energy transition, and then cross-cutting issues which are very similar to what I have heard today. So training, capacity building, information and standardization, things like this. There is a project which is called LEAP-RE, and Project LEAP-RE is financing actually a partnership or a network, let's say. And this network then, with budget from the European Union, also budget from the members, from the countries that participate in this network, they finance projects, research and innovation projects, and knowledge transfer projects in African countries. At the same time, they have such a board that you are discussing and talking about. So a board which decides which are the priorities or which are the topics that need to be financed in next calls. So there is a similar structure which is financed with this project LEAP-RE with African countries. And I think, I don't know now exactly which are the member states that participate in this project and member states from the European Union and countries from Africa that participate, but there must be an overlap, obviously.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Any other reaction on this point? Otherwise, maybe to bring a bit, come back a bit to a point you mentioned about de-risking. And also coming back to the question a bit of confidence in the certification, etc. We've been talking a lot about skills and essentially cooperation on training, etc. But also from what I understand, there's very often some lack of very material things like equipment to be able to either train people on or to deliver testing of installation and ensure the quality of what is being deployed. Could there be some areas of cooperation specifically on these fronts as well? Hervé?
We have had a reflection with our Niger partner on the subject, and as it was said in introduction, one difficulty is the ecosystem needed to have laboratories with climatized air conditions, and you cannot have it everywhere. You have a critical size. So I think that a partnership between developed countries and developing countries is a good thing, because you can have what we call in France co-tutelle, shared supervision of thesis, of research, and you can have people from developing countries working on both sides, developed in European laboratories, and locally driving their subject of research. So it's important. I think the testing condition, when you speak about quality, for example, for batteries or for PV panels, you have difficulties in some countries, because usually tests of materials are made just in the harbor. You deliver panels, you have the control quality coming there. It's good, okay, you come in the country. It's not good, you go back to your factory. When you are in the middle of Africa, Niger has no harbor. How can you make it? Where can you make it? So you have this kind of difficulties, how to know the quality of the systems, how to finance the machines, because a test machine is $500,000 each one, something like that, and you have to make the environment with a constant power grid, with climatization. So to me, this is something, a big difficulty. We really need to control the quality of materials, of systems, and also of installation. So it's some kinds of audit after installation, but you have all these things to do, and you have a critical size to have. You have a real process at the materials reception to put in place, and as it was said, but I don't remember who said that, but it depends on the localization and the country.
Yes?
I mean, concerning testing, a general rule would be that the further down you move the value chain, the more local the content is. So at the beginning, materials, maybe cells, modules. I think for those it's probably sufficient if you have a few strong test centers around the world, spread out a bit. But if you move to installations, for example, monitoring of installation, monitoring of yield, there the content is so strongly local that you will probably need in all countries capacities for testing and so on. So for the more upstream parts, partnerships might be a good option, so that you decide that per continent or whatsoever you have 2 or 3 strong centers. But for the systems and installations, the power plants and so on, they need testing capacities everywhere, which might fit quite well because the upstream tests are quite expensive, or the infrastructure is expensive. But for the monitoring in local field, that's not so expensive. You will need lots of skilled people. But I experienced some developments that many countries wanted to have a cell testing facility and so on, and that didn't really succeed because the investment is so high. You need specially trained people, and I don't think that that's necessary. But for downstream part, it's definitely necessary.
I think it's an important point. Maybe these places could also become the repositories of data gathering, and therefore the entire over of knowledge and experience on data gathering could provide inputs into designing that strategy.
I mean, just following up on what you said and what Herb said. Of course, infrastructure is a challenge when we talk about research, particularly research and research labs in the smaller countries or the African countries or the LDC SIDS. And hardware is, of course, the bigger challenge than the softer part. But in terms of whatever is available with the Center of Excellence in Europe or other regions, I'm talking about the softer part where you have the guidelines, where you have the documents, where you have standards for some of the testing. So do you classify these documents, or do you classify these resources, or is it open for all?
I mean, if there's a standard for testing, then the standard procedure is public, I would say. But most of the testing capacity is basically in the head of the experts, so we don't have it all written down that you can give it to someone, he reads the manual how to test, and then it's done. I mean, we have experts who have done testing for 10 to 20 years, and only they can really do the test as planned. So it's not that simple, probably, even if it was written down. So the standard testing that you have to do, the rules that you have to follow, that's public, but that's only a minor part of the job.
Sorry, just building on that, in terms of testing and standards, etc., needed in countries from, well, we're a member-based organization, so from some of the discussions I had, for example, in one of the countries was standards exist to a certain extent, but not necessarily the ones that are needed. So, yeah, building on that, so policy and having the right regulatory framework there, and recognizing the importance of standardization bodies in each country is quite relevant there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and then I propose we move to a following point.
It's more like a comment and something that I think Saba also mentioned this. You know, you often have a dichotomy. Do you want the public or the governments to be involved? How involved in establishing these standards? And then on the other hand, can you leave it to the market? And this is something that we, you know, as providers of training and capacity building, we do struggle with. And it's true, the local aspect makes a big difference. But I imagine for ISA, for ISA, as at this level where you're, you know, trying to really move things, it's very hard to come up with a solution that you can sort of implement like a blanket strategy. So I understand your difficulty, and it's just a comment that, I mean, it really is something that we also, you know, we often, in some situations, you would go in and say, okay, together with the government institutions, we're going to work here to develop, you know, in this case, it would be, you know, certain standards for certain job profiles or something like that. And that ties in a little bit with a colleague from the US, I forgot your first name, Moses, exactly said earlier what they, he was talking about a project where they established sort of, you know, lighthouse institutions or you know, and with them then develop further these projects. And it's not always easy to find out in a certain country or context who these actors are. And I mean, that's something that, so it's really hard to just come up with a blanket policy. It's often country specific. But I do think it's really useful to have some foundational blocks that, for example, ISA could be the, you know, the sort of holders of, and then you just roll that out depending on how the local context affects. But that was more like a comment and a frustration, perhaps.
So, you know, one of the problems that I see is that there, you know, most countries have a well-established system for standards for technical products. And typically there are institutions in most countries which either take the ISO standards and convert them, or the IEA, what is it, the IES, whatever it is, the ISO standards, and convert them to local conditions. As soon as you talk of standards, when the person you're talking to says,
we'll have to move through them. So for capacity building, can we use some other words so that we don't fall down this hole?
So thank you, and I would propose a bit moving forward in the discussion because we have a very nice talk, but time flies, and a bit looking more precisely at okay, what could be done within ISA with international cooperation. A bit the next question I would like to ask you is what role do you see for your respective organizations and countries in contributing to the establishment, for instance, of a global platform to promote research and innovation? So, especially within the framework of the ISA, and especially also what challenges you feel we need to already identify and tackle to make sure actually we have a platform that then delivers delivers the right effects.
Yeah, speaking of Fraunhofer, we are from a technical research organization, so we mainly have the technical background. We also have experience in technical consulting of different countries, different levels. So, I mean, a role of us would be obviously to help in the technical standards and bring in our experiences that we have from different countries. We also, in the last years, moved more away from the technical direction, also in the dimension of capacity building, policy advice, and so on, because we noticed that it's not only the technology that, at some time it was the technology that needed to develop. The technology of PV is advanced, and now, let's say, the softer topics are becoming more and more important to roll out PV. Yeah, so that would be our role, basically technical advice, but also bringing in what we know from different countries and scenarios.
Yeah. Are there any dates? I mean, maybe I will also point a bit the floor to Maria, because the European Commission is already very good at setting up a research innovation cooperation platform. What guidance maybe do you think you could be providing there?
As I said before, it is already being done, and perhaps partially with members of the International Solar Alliance. This is being done. So for me, what it is important is, first of all, that there is this platform engages the right people, okay? Engages the right people, and there is, when we say engagement, it means that the people who participate there, they are committed to the objectives of this platform. Then another important thing for the platform would be to develop priorities, or to develop, I would not like to call it a strategic research agenda, because this phrase is being used a lot, but in any case, to develop priorities which would not be only technological. For me, as you have mentioned before, it's technology is not the issue, it's the soft issues, or the exchange of knowledge, the exchange of information, of know-how, of policies sometimes. Which are the policies and the incentives that these countries can give in order to promote the deployment of PV? And not only standards, but policies and incentives is something which is very important. And this can be exchanged. This is the information that can be exchanged. Then there are other things like training, for example, and training of personnel, training of and information exchange of people in general, not only of dedicated of installers or of technical personnel, but also information campaigns on people, on how to use, on how to install, not install themselves, but on what are the the benefits, let's say, of using photovoltaics and how actually to take full advantage of these benefits. This is a lot of information, I think, and then, yeah, this is a kind of, not a kind, this is a lot of information that can be exchanged through this platform. Okay?
Yes. All right. I agree with Maya's position with LIPRI because effectively it's an organization, a total of programs that are oriented with cooperation between Europe and Africa, but we are dealing with research and innovation, and LIPRI is financing programs from Tier 2 to Tier 6. That is laboratory research. And I think that developed country needs, what developed country needs is Tier 7 to 9, that is industrialization. Maybe ISA platform could complete LIPRI research program with transformation to concrete, to realization for developing countries that can't wait 5 years to have a solution, a technical solution. Maybe it's applied, more applied research and innovation that is to be developed in the area of ISA that would be useful to me.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, we're mainly focused on rural areas, obviously, and so have a slightly different focus than the ISA in the sense that it's very specific. And we're also, obviously, like I think most of us here, trying to reach SDG 7 and get to it as fast as possible if, well, we're already a bit behind, but to do as much as we can to get there. And I mean, as actually, I imagine from all the people here around the table, we can all help in terms of knowledge sharing, right? So, I mean, our focus is obviously the private sector. So, and private sector is not only research and innovation institutions, but also the private sector who come up with innovative ideas. So, for example, we have a I4E, which is an Innovation for Electrification series, where we present the innovative solutions of our members. We also do some trainings and so on, but basically the thing is that through our members in our case, but through research or other activities from the people around the table, I think there's a lot of knowledge that can be shared also on that platform, and that could then accumulated build a good basis, international basis, if you like, of general knowledge. Thank you.
Yes, just to build on this LEAP RE, which I didn't know about, which is and so I think so that's Europe and Africa, as I understand it. So an ISA would be globally, so it would have, but it would be, I think, really important to see what is already there and how to use it, and I think it's also important to recognize that indeed there is a lot of knowledge in developing countries that can be shared, but I think now in developing countries they are learning very, very quickly, and for example in India they asked for knowledge from Europe on how to install solar panels in Ladakh in territorial union, where it's extremely cold, extremely cold. So how to do this? So they asked for knowledge, and I think now they are learning, and now I think we can learn from how they are implementing it. So I would be careful with calling it too much sharing information from developing countries to developed countries to developing countries. It's I think now, in particular in relation to how to install and maintain solar panels and develop new technologies. I think a lot is going on now in developing countries and also in emerging economies such as India. But my main plea is to use the existing networks and to see how ISA can build on that and have something global. Yeah.
Any other comments? Maybe not. I think it's starting to be a long session. People maybe get tired, but I have at least one more question for you, and maybe before that, a bit of a slightly provocative type of question or interrogation. Is we've been talking a lot about training installers. We've been talking a lot about ensuring the quality, certifying, etc., systems and workers. But in the end, research innovation is not just that. It's also, researching and developing new processes. And maybe something I feel we might have missed a bit is how can we build the capacity of developing and least developed countries to contribute to bring their own contribution to PV innovation and to push maybe a bit the PV technologies forward. I don't know if anyone has a bit of a view on that. If not, Julia.
Actually, that was what I thought I was referring to earlier in terms of our membership. It's not only European companies, etc., but it's worldwide. So these are private sector players in developing countries, in whatever you might call them, but not necessarily European Western ones. And so, indeed, taking their example from concrete situations, either projects where they had to find a certain solution because of an issue they had there, or because of meteorological sorry for complications, etc. But also innovations from that region. So sorry, I just wanted to maybe clarify on that at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Maya. Oh.
You wanted Simon? If I take the example of the LIBRE project, in order to do so, in order to help African countries to build or to enhance their innovation, research and innovation systems, it is not only financing just projects there, but it is building networks. And these networks, they are, first of all, it's a first means of communication between researchers, between people who are actively involved in research, not only researchers, but also perhaps policymakers in research, from countries in Africa and countries in Europe. Then these networks can develop in exchange of personnel. So people from African countries, for example, they can have some training, short training stays in big laboratories in countries in the European Union, and then they go back to their country and they have the information and the knowledge on certain how to not only to build a lab, but also on the procedures which are established in more developed, let's say, laboratories. So they can transfer this knowledge from one lab to another. And so by the creation of these networks, I think that there is a lot of information that can circulate. Also information that can circulate from an African country to another African country as well. Sometimes this information, and I'm not talking about only African countries, but I mean not essentially between European countries and African or other, but among African countries, because they know better the conditions and the specificities. And sometimes these conditions and specificities are more related between the same type of countries, and they can exchange information and experience. And this is also very important, I think.
So thank you. And do you have a...
I actually had a bit of a cheeky question. In terms of, I mean, ISA would be quite an ideal organization because your membership base is really international, and a lot of the developing, or the countries we've been talking about that are outside of the EU. And the question would be to, turn it back to you. What is it that you would need in order to facilitate these things?
Manuel, this is a difficult question. The easy answer, of course, is nothing. Okay? But the longer answer is, remember that we are in a sense, terra incognita here. We are learning. There are lots of people who have had this experience. So therefore, what we want is a network of research institutions who we can use as sounding boards when these kinds of events occur, so that we can get advantage from their knowledge and experience.
Yes, Awe?
I think the point is good because, to me, research in developing countries is as a driver. These drivers are the usual technology progress. It's an evidence that you have to increase the performance of cells and modules and panels, but also an economic driver. For example, in space industry, photovoltaics power has no problem of cost. It's a problem of weight. That transforms into a problem of cost with the launcher, but it's first a problem of weight. So to answer to your question, I think that developing countries could bring new drivers to research and innovation. Different conditions of use of environment, of price, and that is what developing countries could bring to research and technology, and participating with giving their own inputs for what we need. So, good point. What do you need?
Yes, Moses?
Just a quick comment. I think it will be important I think the private sector in Africa, bringing them as a partner to any type of assistance program related to solar will be crucial in order to exchange lessons learned for us, to learn about their particular geographical context and needs, and also vice versa, in the sense that they will learn about the drivers, the technical assistance, the financial mechanisms that being developed outside the African continent. Just to give you a quick example, the U.S. Agency for International Development, Power Africa, has brought in private sector partners from Africa in order to implement renewable energy programs. And it's a two-way street, and that's the way we see it with Power Africa. Not only they are learning from our experiences, but we are also learning from their particular geographical context. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Because essentially there was a very nice dynamic for the panel, because you started discussing the last question I wanted to ask, which was to just read it a bit aloud, a bit what would be the main characteristics for ISA Research and Innovation Sounding Board to really aggregate technical technical resources for research and innovation. And I think that's a bit of a nice summary to really indeed rely on the requirements of the private industry and local conditions, local constraints that also drive a bit innovation. I don't know if there's any a bit complement to that. Yes, so we have two hands.
Sorry. Yeah, also the aspect of it being open access, just as a keyword, I think that's quite important, I believe. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, so my name is Neelab Singh, and I'm supporting Edwin in the project that the EU is cooperating with ISA. So actually, the gentleman from Fraunhofer really, for me, struck out when he said that there's a wave coming, right? Which to some degree makes ISA's job easy in terms of solarization, because if that wave is coming, we will automatically meet the targets of PV solarization. But then the issues coming with that is where I think this research and innovation sounding board, and as Maria said, that there should be a plan. So for me, if I'm trying to connect the dots and looking at some of the existing platforms or initiatives like Lipari, etc., maybe we should look at the issues that will come up when this wave is, coming. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I think that we should, in my opinion, we shouldn't be looking at developed versus developing, because in this room we are basically people from developed countries, but you have all the experience and knowledge from other countries as well. So I think it's a globalized sort of a field now when we look at research and innovation. So that's kind of what I gathered from the discussions as of now.
So if there's no urgent comments, I think we might be able to end this session on time, and it's a very busy week, so I'm sure you'll all appreciate. So it was very a pleasure to moderate this discussion, and I now give the floor to the Director General to conclude this session.
Thomas, many, many thanks. I think that this is clearly an area where all of us are getting into, in a sense, areas which we do not normally get into. It's not that this is an unknown area. I mean, as the discussion showed, each one of us has had experiences in this area, except that there is no organized way of doing it. I'm delighted, Maria, that you talked of the program between the EU and the AU, because that, to me, tells us that there is a way ahead, and we would very much like to see how we could also be part of that effort. But I think, as you know, Monalita, your question completely threw me off. And I think, Hervé, was it you or was it you, Simon? One of you also asked the same question. And to a very large extent, it is these kinds of discussions that will decide how we move ahead. Because we have a broad idea of what the problem is. You have a broad idea of how this could be met. Some of you have experiences which you have shared. Thanks very much, Julia, for example, the inputs that you provided. I think that we have a feeling of how we can proceed. We have people who have had this kind, who have this kind of knowledge, who have these experiences. We would like to see how we can put them together in a framework where we can start using you. We'll have to see, Maria, how we link up with the program. What was the name again? It was a difficult name.
No, it's easy. LEAP,
okay.
R-E.
R-E.
R-E,
Okay.
renewable energy.
Okay.
I think.
So it's not look before you leap,
No.
it's leap into RE.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I think, clearly this is a EU program. Our colleagues, our colleagues from the UK have decided they will no longer be part of the European Union. The US is, of course, physically separated from the EU by a huge ocean, but nevertheless, Moses, the US has been a strong partner. We would like to see how we can build this up. Whether it is the agencies which have been involved in these things, or whether it is the NREL. NREL has been actually involved in a lot of projects in a lot of countries, including in training. We would like to see how we can develop this kind of a network that can be useful both to the participants, because in a sense there is a degree of knowledge that is also shared with them, but also to learn from them. So I want to thank each one of you. And again, Thomas, many, many thanks for agreeing to moderate it. Maria, many thanks for coming, and particularly for leaping with Ari. Thanks so much.